It was that the Sahaba wanted to always pray behind the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But there was also this overwhelming thought that the enemy could attack at any moment as well. But would the companions leave to not pray behind the Prophet ﷺ? Would they just let another group go and pray behind the Prophet and then come back and pray their own prayer or appoint their own imam while the Messenger of Allah ﷺ is amongst them? Do you see the dilemma for the Sahaba? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave a way here and said to the Messenger ﷺ that you become the imam. And then a group of them, some of them, stand behind you while the rest of them defend. They show their faces to the enemy. They pray one rak'ah with you, the group that's with you. After one rak'ah, they go and fight or they go and defend their borders. And the second group comes and prays the second rak'ah with you. They pray the second rak'ah with you. And the Prophet ﷺ would complete his own prayer in that time, meaning he ﷺ is the imam. Then the first group comes back and it completes its prayer. It completes its prayer. So this is what we know as Salatul Khawf, where both groups get to pray with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's a good group of scholars that say that this prayer was only for the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. But in the Hanafi school, meaning to say that it's only specific for the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and it was only in the time of the companions. And now it's abrogated, the law doesn't exist now. However, we Hanafis say that this law does exist and it will carry on till the day of judgment. The reason for that is that wouldn't even the companions say that they want to read behind Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq? But if you take it all the way to the day of judgment, or to the end of times I should say, you find that if you were at the end of times, would you give up the right to pray behind Imam Mahdi, for example? No, you would say that to pray behind him is a great honor, because even the great Sayyidina Isa ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam will pray behind him as well, as we know from the hadith of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. So therefore, when you have that, would you give up the right to pray behind him? So therefore, as Hanafis, we say that this prayer still exists today and will exist till the day of judgment, insha'Allah ta'ala. We also had ahkam in Surah Al-Ma'idah in regards to wudu, for example. What the fard of wudu are, I don't need to explain that to you all. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions them. But as Muslims, we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator, He's a sustainer, He's the nourisher, and He does whatever He likes subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is free of His creation in any way, shape and form. Whatever may come into our minds regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of being creation or like creation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free of that. That is to say as well that even if we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may be a father of someone, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free of that. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a son, or He Himself is a son of someone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free of all of this. He's the creator of all of these things, but He's free of it Himself subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has no beginning, He has no end. Now in these two surahs, and specifically in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is correcting our creed as well. What's the creed that we should have in regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That He does not have a son. Now what did the Christians do? They raised the rank of Sayyidina Isa ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam till they said that He is the son of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather you find in this day and age that they say that He is God Himself. Some say His son, but now you find that they say that He is God Himself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rectifies that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also rectifies that Sayyidina Isa ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam, as per the creed of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, is still alive. Bar rafa'ahu Allahu ilayh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised Him towards Himself. Raised Him towards Himself. They believed that they had killed Sayyidina Isa ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised Sayyidina Isa towards Himself. In the latter part of these verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even says that there will not be a single one from Bani Israel, not a single person from Bani Israel, that includes the Christians and the Jews, not a single one except on the day of judgment they will believe in him. They will have to believe in him on the day of judgment. Doesn't matter if they were Jews or Christians. Christians already believe, but here more specifically the Jews. They will have to believe in Sayyidina Isa ala Nabina wa salatu wasalam, especially towards the end of times. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Sayyidina Isa will be a shaheed over them. He will be a witness over them, against them even to say that they did not believe in him. They rejected him. And then they claim that they killed Sayyidina Isa ala Nabina wa salatu wasalam, when they did not kill him ala Nabina wa salatu wasalam. But then you find, and in this day and age, you find people that say Sayyidina Isa, they make a whole debate that Sayyidina Isa was killed and he has passed away from this dunya and he will not return unto this dunya. It is the Aqeedah of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah that Sayyidina Isa will return towards the end of times. And he will be part of the ummah of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And he will come as a follower of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. The reason why some people will say to you that Sayyidina Isa has passed away, because they want to take away the finality of the prophethood of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Because they want to claim that they are prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like you have the Qadianis, for example. They always make this debate regarding Sayyidina Isa ala Nabina wa salatu wasalam. But you might think that they just targeting it for no reason. They take it from there all the way to deny the finality of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam's prophethood. So be aware of this. We find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created him miraculously, without a father. And we find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us regarding some of his attributes, that he is the kalima of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the ruh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the soul that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. Or that air which Sayyidina Jibreel blew into the mother of Sayyidina Isa ala Nabina wa salatu wa salam. He is that soul. This is the rank of Sayyidina Isa. He's got these great qualities from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of curing leprosy. He's got this, that he can cure blindness. Even a person does not even have eyes. One is that a person has eyes and is blind. In Ahlul Sunnah we say that even people who do not even have eyeballs, he could make them see as well. He could make them see. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him lots of things. He could make a mold into a bird. Get a mud or soil and mold it like into a statue of a bird, and then he would blow over it and he would fly away. This was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to Sayyidina Isa ala Nabina wa alayhi salatu wa salam. But all of these miracles, all of this greatness to Sayyidina Isa ala Nabina wa alayhi salatu wa salam. And I'm going to come back to this. So remember this greatness of Sayyidina Isa. But then on the other hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Sayyidina Musa ala Nabina wa alayhi salatu wa salam, of how his nation followed him, but then they were constantly disobeying. To the last portion of this juz, of the 6th juz, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that this very Bani Israel was cursed by 2 prophets, Sayyidina Musa and Sayyidina Isa ala Nabina wa alayhi salatu wa salam. By both of them. Why? Because they were constantly disobeying their prophets that were sent to them. Denying what, and Imam Suyuti says here, that why were they cursed? Because they were denying the true attributes of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were hiding them from people. They knew the attributes of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, but they hid them. Now Sayyidina Musa ala Nabina alayhi salatu wasalam, you know the story that he leaves Egypt. He takes Bani Israel with him. There's a bit of a discourse on which way he went and where actually Mount Sinai is, Mount Tur is. Some say it is in modern day Egypt. Majority of us say that it is the north of Saudi Arabia. You know, the north of Saudi Arabia. And there's various reasons for that, or why Mount Tur should be situated over here. One of the reasons is that Bani Israel never entered into Palestine in the time of Sayyidina Musa ala Nabina wa salatu wasalam. Never entered. So if you went to Mount Sinai, which was in Egypt, Bani Israel when Sayyidina Musa left them and said, I don't want anything to do with them. Oh Allah, grant me debts closer to Palestine. And then where he is buried now, that's where the angel of death came to him. But where is that? That's closer to the Syrian side. So how did Bani Israel just jump over Palestine and not enter into Palestine? So a lot of the scholars say that he parted the sea closer to where modern day Saudi Arabia is, and he entered from here. Mount Tur is situated around here in this area, and then from there he entered towards Syria. Now here we find in this surah Al-Ma'idah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, and I'll shorten a little, that they had to do jihad, they had to earn. But what happened was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered Sayyidina Musa that tell your nation to go and fight in Palestine. But who was ruling Palestine at that time? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called them Jababira. They were transgressors, strong, heavy men. Even giants if you like. What did they say? I'll just shorten it slightly. They said we're not going to enter until they leave. But towards the end of it, they said to Sayyidina Musa ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam, you and your Lord go and fight, we're staying here. Look at the Aqidah. Remember what I said? Rectifying Aqidah. The wrong Aqidah that they had. They said, you and your Lord go and fight, we're staying here. Meaning that when you won the war, tell us that's when we'll enter. So Sayyidina Musa ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam just made dua against them. And said, oh Allah, for 40 years do not allow them to enter into it. Do not allow them to enter it. It is said that within these 40 years, Sayyidina Musa said, I'm moving away. Every time these people, Bani Israel, try to get towards Palestine, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make them go in circles and they will be back where they started. For 40 years of their life. For 40 years, they could see it, but they never entered it. They entered it in the time of Sayyidina Yusha, which was straight after Sayyidina Musa ala nabina wa alayhi salatu wasalam. But you find Sayyidina Musa, the one who spoke to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Kalimullah. You find Sayyidina Musa having this greatness that even the angel of death would be scared from taking his life. As you know the story that he slapped the angel of death once and took the eye of the angel of death, according to some narrations. You know the narration. So therefore, even the angel of death, greatness from him. But where does all of this greatness come? Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention greatness of the Anbiya alayhimu salatu wasalam in the Quran? Starting from Sayyidina Adam, born without a mother and father. But his body was made out of clay. You find Sayyidina Ibrahim ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam, the Khalil of Allah. Many Anbiya alayhimu salatu wasalam. We mentioned Sayyidina Musa and Sayyidina Isa and their greatness. But yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the greatness of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. قَدْ جَاءَكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ نُورٌ وَكِتَابٌ مُبِينٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Ma'idah here that verily we have sent to you a light and a glorious book. Many of the Mufassirin say that this light is none other than the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And as the belief of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is the nur and light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather we go beyond and we say that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is the first creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyidina Adam created without a mother and father, but he was created from something. Sayyidina Isa ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam created without a father. And then you have the greatness of Sayyidina Musa, the greatness of Sayyidina Ibrahim. But the greatness of our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa wasallam is that he is the first creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he was created when there was nothing to be created before him. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala truly created the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam from nothing. That's something to understand. We are created from something. Meaning we came from our parents. Then their parents came from their parents all the way to Sayyidina Adam ala nabina alayhi salatu wasalam. So things can carry on. But our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa wasallam is the first creation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala truly created him from nothing. He created us from something. These walls you see, they created from something. But the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was truly created from nothing. Sayyidina Adam was created from something. Not a mother and father, but from something. But the Prophet ﷺ was created from nothing. He just came into being. And he is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the one who wrote the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, some of the Mufassirin say, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the pen to write, it didn't write itself. It was a light of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam who moved the pen and he began to write. This is the greatness of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. So do you understand why Sayyidina Musa is mentioned, Sayyidina Isa is mentioned, but then a small little hint in between this one verse comes saying, telling us the greatness of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. And there are many other things that we can mention in this surah and in this portion of the Quran, but inshallah ta'ala we'll leave some for tomorrow's juz. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our tarawih from us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept the recitation of the Quran from us as well.